that if you're the one that's going to initiate the conversation, it's better to err on the side of being a nice.
Excellence at Work is sponsored by Youngstown State University.
So I'm an associate professor in the departments of management and marketing. I teach marketing, everything from the introductory undergraduate kind of introduction to marketing, all the way through the graduate students in our online MBA program. And mostly I'm interested in advertising, retailing, and services marketing. So that tends to be what I focus on.
So this would explain why you did the research you did.
Exactly.
Right. Well, tell us a little bit about this research, what it was called, and I guess how you got interested in it.
So I did some research with a colleague from Towson University, Veronica Thomas, and the research was about how brands interact with each other on Twitter. We specifically looked at Twitter, but the same thing would apply in other social media as well. And we really started looking at it because we would talk to each other about the strange things that Wendy's would post on Twitter. Wendy's, which seems like it should be this wholesome, wholesome company with the little girl with the pigtails, but they're known for being kind of snarky on Twitter. So we would talk about why they were doing that. And we started to look into some of the research and found that there's a lot of research that talks about how to interact with your customers over social media, but there's not a lot of research about how to interact with other businesses, but they're starting to do it. You're starting to see a lot of businesses interact with each other. So we wanted to see, what kind of rules should they be following? What should they be doing?
So I read that in the in one of the articles about this. I was not aware that Wendy's had that reputation.
Yeah, did you look it up then? You should check out their Twitter account. It's really quite funny.
Okay. Well, I guess so. What did you find out? Is that something Wendy's should be doing?
Well, what we found out was that while it's working for Wendy's, it might not work for everybody. So we did a series of 2 different studies, first with fictional brands that we made up, and then we did a second study actually looking at real brands. And what we found was that consumers kind of looked at the whole dialogue. So they looked at the interchange between the companies. And if the first person to kind of reach out to another brand, they wanted them to be nice about it. They didn't want them to appear overly aggressive because they got penalized if they felt like the initial company was, making fun of the other one or being too snarky is what we call it. And then if the company responded, though, it was interesting because the responding company kind of had a little bit more leeway. So if the initial company was kind of snarky, then the responding company could be snarky back without kind of any penalties. But if the initial company was nice and the responding company wanted to up the game a little bit and be a little bit more snarky, then they were penalized. Consumers didn't like them as well. They were less likely to follow them, less likely to like their tweets.
When I read it, it struck me, or it seemed to me at least, and this is just what I took away from it, it seemed as if the people who were observing the studies were looking at the companies as if they were watching 2 strangers have a conversation, and they both sort of started on neutral ground. So if the first person was aggressive, that person, they didn't like them.
Right.
If that person was nice and the second person was aggressive, they didn't like the second person, and then it allowed the first person to then be aggressive because now the viewer was basically going, well, the second person started it.
Deserved it, yeah.
Right.
Deserved it.
It almost seemed like they were just watching 2 people have a conversation and sort of judging them as opposed to companies talking on Twitter.
That's exactly actually how we came about the study. So we looked into, there wasn't any theories in marketing that would kind of explain what should happen. So we looked for theories in communication. And the theory that we found was actually based on human communication and what would happen if an observer saw 2 people having an argument, kind of what would they think about the people involved. So that was actually the theory that we ended up going with in the study, and just applied it to marketing because more and more people feel that brands or companies really are kind of people, if you will. Like they feel like they have some of the personalities of people. So they would react the same way you might to an actual discussion you overheard. Yeah.
And what were the did we say what the kind of the differences were between the two studies, between the made up companies and the companies where I believe the tweets were just sort of tinkered with a little bit?
Right. So the first study that we did, we made up companies. It was 2 bakeries that we made up. And just because we wanted to be able to write tweets that kind of fit what we were looking for. So we made one that was funny, made fun of the other company just a little bit, but no one would take offense to it. And then for the second one, we kind of upped the game a little bit and made it a little bit more snarky. And we found that it worked there. So we said, okay, let's try to find companies where we can take their tweets that are actually happening and see what people's reactions are to real companies with the tweets. So we found that in Chicago, there's kind of a competition between Shedd's Aquarium and the Field Museum, where they will make fun of each other a little bit on Twitter. So we used tweets that they had both actually put out, but they weren't kind of the way that we had arranged them. So we arranged them so they went one after the other kind of as a reply. Again, they were real tweets that we took, but we just rearranged them a little bit.
So I guess what should a business take away from this when they're thinking about implementing their own social media strategy?
It's okay to be funny, but you don't want to be aggressive. You have more leeway if you're the one that's responding. So if some other brand or company had reached out to you via social media, then you can respond in kind if that's the projection that you want to make, or it never hurts to go the nice route. So I personally would feel better about going the safe route and just staying nice and funny, but nice. But again, it gives you the leeway to kind of up the game if you want to.
Do you have any examples of people who are using this research or looking at it or doing building on it or anything like that?
Well, it actually hasn't been published yet. So it's online, it's available online. It's going to be in the Journal of Advertising, but it hasn't been published. So to my knowledge, nobody's using it at this point.
You said it's online?
Yeah, it is available online.
Where can people find it?
If you go to any research database where you can look up academic articles, you should be able to see it there.
Okay, what was the name of it again? I can't remember.
The name of it is Turn the Other Cheek or An Eye for an Eye, Exploring Brand-to-Brand Dialogue on Social Media.
And do you have any idea when it will be, when it'll appear in that publication?
It will be published this year, but that's all they'll tell us.
Okay. And do you have, I guess, any plans for a follow-up or even some other research that you're working on that's coming down the road that's unrelated or tangentially related?
So we do a lot of research about celebrity endorsers. Right now we're working on looking at kind of the history of celebrity influencers or social media influencers and kind of getting a sense of where the research is right now in terms of how you would go about selecting an influencer to work with, or if you yourself were an influencer, kind of some of the things that you should keep in mind.
Excellence at Work is sponsored by Youngstown State University.